Okay, so this is the first business and market day here in Nigeria. Everyone, welcome to the program. This is your Business Morning with me, Bosun Amofaye. Let's get the new week started with what came through over the weekend. Nigeria's Securities and Exchange Commission on Sunday issued a statement affirming that OandO was given fair hearing and sufficient opportunity of being heard before the company was penalized. That's in reaction to the court injunction secured by the listed energy trader last week, asking the SEC and all its agents to stay off from executing any of those penalties imposed in a 5-page document sent to the oil company about 2 weeks ago now. So the SEC over the weekend reacted in about 3-page document that the commission in the course of its forensic investigation between 2017 and 2019, that letters and phone calls were exchanged and meetings held between the Commission and OandO PLC requesting for comments and explanations. According to the SEC press statement, the forensic auditors Deloitte and Touch held regular sessions with members of the board and senior management of OandO PLC and afforded them the opportunity to provide explanation. According to the regulator, the responses given OandO PLC were however considered unsatisfactory, prompting the decision by the Commission to penalize the company and some of the individuals related to it for violations of securities laws. The SEC says, in conclusion, that the failure or refusal of the Commission to act in the face of the serious issues thrown up by the investigations into OandO or to reverse its directives would undermine the federal government's agenda to build strong institutions and promote the transparency and integrity of the Nigerian capital market. End of quote. Meantime, the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry over the weekend also called for what it calls concessionary tax rate for small and medium enterprises to meet the objectives of job creation and inclusive growth as contained in the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan, also known as the ERGP. The Chamber expressed concerns about the persistent delay also in the issuance of pre-arrival assessment report, or called a PAR, to importers by Nigeria Customs Service, adding that the delay is adding to the costs and not in line with the federal government's ease of doing business policy. The oldest business chamber in Nigeria is also worried about reports of interception of containers on the highways by the Standard Organization of Nigeria, as well as the Federal Inland Revenue Service instruction to banks to place a lien on accounts on alleged tax defaulters. So what's on tap for this week? A special meeting of Union Bank shareholders will take place tomorrow, Tuesday the 11th. The lender is looking to cut 54.458 billion naira from its share premium account to exit its legacy debts and retained deficit of 47.736 billion on its full year 2018 financials. That's one big story tomorrow, and we're looking into that business meeting. Meantime, big news, we're expecting big news of major shares crossing from OandO 40 Oil PLC beginning from today on, because the listed agency, the listed energy company, is going to be sealing the departure of a major shareholder. An announcement of a new chairman and CEO are expected to be made before the end of the week. That's one big story also on our radar for this week. Meantime, Wednesday, the markets will be closed for Nigeria's first ever national June 12 Democracy Day, as officially marking the June 12, 1993 general elections that was annulled by the IBB's administration. Over the weekend, the Central Bank Chief Godwin Emefiele hosted business leaders and policymakers in Lagos, harvesting their thoughts and ideas as inputs into its next 5-year roadmap. That will be set for unveiling in the current business week. And one of the biggest news on west coast of the continent this week is the AFDB's annual meetings, and all delegates are arriving in their hundreds for these taking place in the Equatorial Guinea capital, Malabo. Live to us from there via Skype is Ladi Araba, who is the Managing Director of Africa and also a former Senior Investment Officer at the EFDB Group. She also served as a technical committee member for the Nigerian government at some point. Good morning, madam. It's good to have you on the program this morning. Ladi, thank you so much. I'm sure you must have arrived over the weekend for these meetings. So bring us up to speed what your outlook is on these general meetings. Okay, I think we have a bit of audio technical issues there with Ladi Araba, who is the Managing Director of Africa and a former Senior Investment Officer with the EFDB Group. She's raising the curtain on what is going to be a week-long meeting of the DFI, that's the Development Finance Institutions, headquartered in Abidjan, the Ivorian capital, but the venue for this year's annual meetings is in Malabo, the Equatorial Guinea capital. We have our own Temple Ashaju, our business correspondent on the ground there. He's arriving in Malabo and will also be speaking to us in the course of the week. The umbrella issue for this year's annual meetings is about regional integration and how to use what you called regional economic power hubs to power the entire continental integration and growth. That's one big story we're following for you beginning today and through the rest of the week. We'll keep everyone in the loop. If we check in with the market, it was a bit of a very weak finishing last week. Of course, the market week last week was a shift off by a 2-day public holiday. So this week is going to be another trading week, shot by one single trading week because of the June 12th Democracy Day. That's going to be a big story. Everyone's looking at what President Buhari would, what his speech Wednesday will look like, whether the president will use that opportunity to speak to his new cabinet. And because if he's swearing in on May 29, about 2 weeks after, there's still no idea of who is going to make his second cabinet for the next 4 years into 2023. So that will be one big story for everyone on Wednesday. So what's the business of democracy really like since 1999? 20 years on, we'll have some time this week to speak to that for everyone. But the markets as reopening today will be focusing on the SEC's reaction to the court injunction against the regulator secured about 2 weeks ago by OandO Nigeria PLC. The SEC has responded and saying that the oil energy firm was given fair hearing and that the actions taken in those directives, those 5-page documents, were actually in the interest of investors. Some of the allegations on the street against the regulator over the last week had been that OandO was not given fair hearing and that the concluding report of the Deloitte & Touche audit was not given to OandO to comment on or even view before those directives or penalties were imposed on the energy company. Now the SEC says that OandO was given fair hearing. The investigation, the forensic audit took place within the premises of OandO Nigeria PLC, and that phone calls, emails, and letters were written and comments were sought from the board and management of OandO, but those responses from OandO were unsatisfactory. I think we have a very satisfactory audio issue now with, to clear up with Ladi Araba, who is joining us via Skype from Malabo, Equatorial Guinea capital, the venue of the 2019 annual meetings of the EFDB Group. Ladi, thank you very much. I'm sure you can hear me very clearly now. Thank you very much for coming through. So my first question is, give us your thoughts about this general meetings. What are your take? What's your outlook on this week? Okay, I think we're still we're trying to patch that audio in. Ladi Araba, if you can hear me, just be on a standby. We'll connect with you within the hour of the programming to raise the curtain for us on this very interesting week. This is an annual meetings of the EFDB, and of course we're covering that and getting some sense of what everyone is looking at for this particular event that will be a major issue for Africa. Of course, we touched on this early last week talking about what will be the conversation around Africa's emerging power sector. Lade will be speaking to us about that. She's spent some of our time consulting for the Nigerian authorities as a technical advisor consultant at some point, and of course being a former senior investment officer at AFDB Group. She also has an insight into this particular issue, how to fix Nigeria's emerging power sector. That's one big story this morning. But let's remind you, over the weekend, Godwin Emefiele assembled some of the biggest names in Nigeria's policy and the business industry together for what he called the stakeholders headhunt for ideas and thoughts about what should be in his 5-year policy roadmap program, which we're expecting for him to unveil later this week. So Godwin Emefiele spent the weekend, Saturday and Sunday, trying to speak to these big names such as Aliko Dangote, as well as other big names in the industry, the new governor of Lagos State. Babajide Sanwo-Olu is the governor of Lagos State, was also in attendance, as well as Jim Ovia, the chairman of Zenith Bank, Atedo Peterside, who's also the founder of Stanbic IBTC Bank, among others, who spoke their minds on various issues. So we'll bring you the first part of that within the show. Then later, within tomorrow and Wednesday, we'll let you hear what others said at that particular important meeting. This is the first meeting of a very stakeholders meeting that the central bank governor is having since it was sworn in for a second term of 5 years last week. And that is one big story for you for this week. Back to the marketplace, where we're looking at the reactions of the markets to SEC statements on OandO's investigation and what is now before the law court. That will be on tap today. Union Bank of Nigeria, PLC, is holding a special shareholders meeting tomorrow. It's called an EGM, an extraordinary general meeting. This lender, second oldest bank in Nigeria, is courting about 54.458 billion naira out of the share premium account for a recapitalization or reorganization program that will help the bank deal with some of its legacy debts and deficit that was in its full year 2018 numbers north of 47 billion naira. That's what will be dealt with tomorrow. Union Bank is looking to secure what you call the blue ocean for the bank moving forward, trying to reduce its legacy debt by taking 54 billion out of its share premium account, where it has in excess of 100 billion, and use that to shock the retained deficit of 47.7 billion, which was on its books at the end of last year. The shareholders are meeting in Lagos tomorrow to give approval, whatever it is, to the directors of the company to carry out this share restructuring or reorganization of the books of accounts of Union Bank. Last week, Friday, when the news came out, the shares of Union Bank finished in the positive territory as this news was hitting the market via the stock exchange. And of course, we have also on tap this week, Dar Communications and its face-off with the industry regulator. Dar Communications is listed on the stock exchange, but the share price has been dormant since 2019 started. Let's ask Adedayo Bakare, who is an investment officer at Afrinvest, is live to us from our studios at the stock exchange in downtown Lagos, what his thoughts are about some of these companies in the news. We're carrying them over from last week into the news week. This week. Good morning, Adedayo. Welcome to the show.
Good morning, Bosin.
Yeah, yes, thank you, Adedayo. What are your thoughts about where we were coming from last week? Some of the stories that were in the headlines, and if you think they will be part of what you call a trading theme for this week, or whether it's going to be more of a let's just push this news aside and try to find some basis for pricing equities differently depending on investor sentiment.
Okay, I think the major story that happened last week was the OandO story with, the SEC story with OandO and the sanctions imposed on the company. But what we've seen over on Friday, over the weekend, was SEC issued a clarification of the position, and because OandO instituted a suit against SEC at the High Court, upon which the ruling, which was previously passed about the resignation of board members is currently on hold. So the clarification offered by SEC was just to say that they followed due process in the prosecution of the affected members of the OandO board, and that they actually gave the company fair hearing. Now, from our own views, we believe obviously the suspension of the the ruling by SEC gives or allows the company time, to be able to maybe respond to other issues as well. It allows for both parties to actually go back to the table and reach an amicable solution. SEC insists that it followed fair hearing, and OandO is saying they weren't given enough time to actually respond to the allegations. So we're going to see a bit of that play out, in the market this week. Although we saw, from the initial turbulence we saw last week, we saw a bit of calm. Now, for the general market, sentiment is currently very weak in the market. Last week, the market lost about 2.1%. We expect that bearish, performance will be sustained into the current week. Now, another story is relating, to the Forte Oil and the possible announcement of a CEO. You could see that also play out in the trading of the stock this week. We already know that Forte Oil has, divested from its upstream business, its Ghana business, and its power sector business to concentrate on, the downstream sector. And the downstream sector is not doing spectacularly well currently due to, government regulations. So we should see a bit of, that play out in the market as well as, the new roadmap for monetary policy over the next 5 years under Godwin Emefiele, as well as the Democracy Day we'll be having on Wednesday. On Wednesday, we are expecting that we'll get a bit more sense into what the presidency is thinking about over the 4 years regarding the economy and other matters.
Yes, if we stick a little bit with OandO's story, two of the non-executive directors handing their resignation, and the company informed the market as appropriately should be on Friday. Do you think this will move the needle in terms of how sentiments are perceived about where all this is going? If two of the non-executive directors quit, will the market be thinking, will other directors also kick the door and say, look, we're leaving, thank you very much? Do you think this will be any trading bias for upside in terms of pricing or downside?
Okay, the conditions upon which inform the resignation is not public, so we can only speculate. For us, we believe when you think in terms of what SEC wanted in terms of the sanctions, banning the group chief executive officer and the deputy chief executive officer from holding positions for about 5 years. That obviously the fallout is going to affect the leadership of the board, and based on the resignations we've seen so far, those are not high profile in that sense of the kind of resignations SEC envisaged. But currently we have a bit of a standoff between SEC and OandO, and it will be interesting to see how that plays out. The resignation we see, we do not think it will have a material impact on the direction of the company or investors' perception on the issue.
Okay, so how would you price in the Forte Oil? That's another company with a different issues entirely. If there's a major crossing, major shareholder, the part as a new chairman, a new CEO, what's your take on this a bellwether within the oil and gas space?
Okay, for us and for I think most investors, the major thing is to look at the evolving business model of the company. Like I mentioned, initially the plan was to continue to expand its downstream business, given all the kinds of regulatory barrier affecting the downstream business. But what we've seen in the past 1 year or so is that the government, the company is redirecting its strategy. So the strategy now is to focus on downstream and divest from power and upstream oil and gas business. Now, for an investor or for us as analysts, what we want to look at is how this will impact the future performances of the company in terms of driving earnings, and also maybe in terms of growth expansion, and also in terms of maybe dividend payment. For us, the downstream space is a bit of a risky segment currently. We know NNPC continues to be the major importer of fuel. We know there's still subsidy. We know actually importing by all these independents and marketers is a bit difficult, and that affects their margins to an extent. So for us, we do not think, in the absence of removal of regulatory controls, the sector is not so bright. The downstream sector of the oil and gas company is not so bright. I believe that is what investors will want to focus on.
Adedayo, let's see what everyone will be focused on. Thank you very much. We appreciate your thoughts. We've got to take a break at this point. Thank you so much, Adedayo Bakare from Afrinvest. 2 minutes, we'll be right back.